look what I've got. It's not mine, unfortunately, but it is an XSR 900 GP. It is on my dyno, and I am flashing the ECU, and that's cool. I've not made a dyno video for quite some time, so I thought this is the perfect opportunity. But then you don't just want to see a video of a bike making an awful lot of noise on the dyno for 30 seconds and that's it. I thought I'd walk you around and explain some of the things that goes on, some of the processes that we have to do to get to the stage of flashing an ECU, running the bike on the dyno, getting everything we need done, getting a good job done for the customer. So, first things first, load the bike on the dyno, strap it down, get it nice and secure. Then we need to get an ignition pickup. The dyno needs to read RPM off the bike. Easiest way of doing that, well, it has an ignition pickup, which is a little magnetic hook. And with an MT-09, the earlier MT-09s, none of this fairing business was here. We go straight into the top of the engine. Now, Yamaha have gone and put on the XSR 900 GP a lovely piece of bodywork in the way. So on the other side of the bike, in actual fact, this handguard's come off and all this fairing panels come off so that we can go straight in there. And that ignition pickup is clipped over the top of the coil stick, and that's how it picks up the RPM data for the dyno. So that's the first job done. Strip a load of bodywork off. Next, we're going to measure AFR, air fuel ratios, and that gets completely messed up by a system called air injection system. There's fresh air which is pumped from the airbox straight to the top of the engine down the exhaust. It's for emissions, that's what happens, that's fine, but it messes with the AFR that we're measuring, so we have to blank it off. Some engines you can get blank off kits for it, whatever, but just temporarily, because this is brand new, the bike's only done 800 miles, it has been serviced, but it's got everything still intact, mostly. So we just have to blank that air injection system off. Now, on an earlier MT-09, you can actually do that electronically, but you can't on this bike for some reason. The Woolwich software has got the ability to turn the solenoid off for the earlier bikes, but that's not here for this bike, don't know why. And it's tucked in quite a long way, so I found the easiest way was to lift the tank, take the tank off, take the top of the airbox off, and you can see the hole where the air is sent down to the top of the engine. So we just tape that over securely with strong tape. We don't want that tape lifting off and disappearing down into the throttle bodies. And then we have to install it back, put the fuel tank back on, etc. So that's the front of the bike. That's the air injection and the ignition pickup done. We'll move to the back of the bike. So back here, you can see I've taken all the bodywork off just to be safe, and we've plugged the bike into a battery charger to keep that in tip-top condition while we're flashing ECUs. It's quite important, that. And then we've got a Woolwich interface box, sometimes called a log box. There's different ones of these depending on which bikes you're flashing the ECU of. This is called the DCAN version 3. This plugs in. Now, in actual fact, a slight change to older MT-09s, this is actually plugged in to the diagnostics port of the bike. Older MT-09s would require a harness, what's called an extension harness, plugged in. You would actually have to insert the pins into the ECU. A little fiddly job that would take 20 minutes, half an hour, and now we just have to plug into the diagnostics port. So that's really cool. That helps us a little bit. That log box is then got a USB cable coming out of that, USB down to the laptop, which is over there. Now, that's sending all TPS, ETV, electronic throttle valve, clutch in, gear position, all of that information, that's going off to the Woolwich software, together with the AFR data that is coming from the Lambda sensor to a little Zytronics control box, and then there's a little data cable that runs from the Zytronics to the log box. So then all of that data, including AFR, is going to the Woolwich software. That's pretty much it for the back of the bike. With this being a new model, there's not many options of aftermarket exhaust available. As you can see here, my customer's gone for a MIV exhaust. It's not one I have a huge amount of experience with, but I think it looks all right. It's a DCAT system. It's fairly open and short on the silencer side, so it's going to be loud. I think it's going to be very, very loud. And quite sensibly, the customers asked me to map the bike with the baffle in place. I think that's it's still quite loud, to be honest, but that's a sensible option. What I'll do at the end of this video is we'll do some power runs on the dyno with and without the baffle, and I'll show you what the difference is going to be making. I have a hunch that baffle is not doing the bike any favours at all. Mapped a whole load of MT-09s over the years. We get as poor as about 104, 105. We get up to about 117 with a decent exhaust like the Akropovich. This one, right, slap bang in the middle of those figures, 109 we're getting at the moment. 109 brake horsepower, really strong mid-range actually, really impressed with the mid-range. So the bike will be lovely to ride. It's got a kind of a real bulge of mid-range, more than previous MT-09s, and that's what an MT-09 feels like on the road, really strong mid-range. So I'm sure the bike is going to be really exciting to ride. You know, that sort of 60, 70 horsepower at low RPM is going to be more important to you than whether you've got another 5 horsepower at 10,000 RPM. So, you know, all is not lost. The engine's good, the power delivery is going to be lovely, and the exhaust looks pretty cool. I think it looks alright, but maybe not the ultimate in power output. We'll see later. Not wanting to turn this video into a how to operate your dyno video, but I thought I'd quickly run through the screens that you can see behind me here and the control system for the dyno, which is linked up to a desktop computer over there in the corner of the room. Some long cables out to these screens, and it's actually a Windows XP machine. That's led me to a few heartaches over the years, and I've now, with the aid and assistance of a good customer, built a really powerful, quite stable Windows XP machine with actually RAID hard drives and obviously dual head graphics and stuff like that. So we're on a good stable platform here, and I've got backup computers, having trawled eBay for many evenings looking for old Windows XP machines. Hopefully soon, one day, we'll have a more modern interface on a Windows 11, 10 platform, but until then we'll stick with this old faithful software. Now, bearing that in mind, of course, the laptop that runs the Woolwich software is completely and utterly separate. There's no link between the two. The dyno is kept separate to the ECU flashing. So on these screens, oh, hang on a minute, get rid of that. On these screens here, we've got the control user interface here showing RPM, AFR, air fuel ratio, and wheel speed, back wheel speed obviously. There's some system parameters here, shows up power graph, and this is a load control dyno, and therefore we have a compressed air brake and an electromagnetic brake which can hold the bike at various RPM. Very useful, very clever, and for tuning you wouldn't want anything else. So that shows you what's going on there. We've got a little control box here, I don't know if you can just see that, which operates those brakes and the fans and other setting buttons. When you've done a run, the run comes up on screen on this side of the screen. It doesn't have to have 2 screens, but I'm just being a bit fancy here. Keeps it separate, and obviously then this can go off to the printer and be printed off for the customer. That's pretty much it. Okay, I'm not really one for screen grab software, so you'll have to excuse me just pointing a camera at the screen, but you know, here's my face. Thanks, Aussie man. So as you can see, this is how we control and work on the ECU flashing process using the Woolwich software. This is the control center of the software, various buttons. There's loads of videos online showing you how Woolwich works. It's a good stable system. I do enjoy using it. It's got good support, and yeah, it gets the job done. But just quickly, you can see here you've got access to fuel maps, which I then put onto this screen here. Just bigger area, gives me more real estate for looking at fuel maps, which we can look at in various ways, the Stasi 3D graph way or the pure numbers way. And And it also allows us to get into the diagnostics, which is pretty cool. Wanted me to start the bike up, but we'll get rid of that for a minute. You can even adjust the RPM limit, and there's some advanced settings showing us how to disable certain aspects, including the top speed limiter. So the system then goes into what we tend to use this with. The way it works rather is a feature called Auto Tune Live. Now if we click on that button, brings up another box which we send over here. Auto Tune Live is another fuel table, and it's collecting all of that data from the bike that we looked at using that interface. It's collecting all of that and the AFR data and making a new fuel map. It does it all itself. Now, that's not to say it doesn't need a bit of manual override. It really does. We need to keep an eye on it. It can put some sort of false neutrals, if you like, in there. But it's certainly a really powerful tool for making a lot of progress getting a fuel table absolutely right. It's important. There's certain things you want to look at to get balancing of IAP and TPS maps correct. Obviously, when you're running electronic throttle valves, what you're applying with your wrist isn't necessarily what's getting to the throttle, and so therefore the fuel table might not match up. So it's a complicated process. It's not the easiest thing to just jump on board and start rattling off fuel tables and starting to program up your ECU and hoping for the best. It's something that takes a bit of time, but hopefully this gives you a little idea on what's going on. Well, I hope you've enjoyed having a look around this rather lovely bike with me, and maybe some of the other stuff I've blurted on about has been of interest to you as well. But I think it's about time I finished off this ECU flash, got the bike running absolutely perfectly, then we'll get it dressed back up and do a few more power runs for you. Cheers. Okay, well, that was interesting to say the least. I don't know how this is going to come out on the video, but my little microphone probably couldn't handle all of that. It's very loud. Without the baffle, it's extraordinarily loud, but sounds fantastic, absolutely gorgeous. That MT-09 triple engine, wow, always sounds good with a decent exhaust system. That doesn't disappoint at all. But with the baffle in, it's costing us 6 horsepower. So, yeah. It's what you want to do. That's a lot of horsepower lost just by a baffle. I thought it would be. I did say at the start that it was going to be cutting power, and that's what it's done. But it sounds gorgeous. It's beautiful on the overrun. I'm sure you enjoyed that bit, that burbling. Played around with the ignition timing a little bit on that overrun to give that extra popping and banging. So I know the owner's going to really enjoy that as well. Still got a little bit of bodywork to put back on the bike, but it's all mostly put back together. That bit of tape has come out of the airbox, so that's now running the full air system, which is why the popping and banging is so mighty. So there we have it. XSR 900 GP, so up and around the 113, 114 horsepower mark, which is pretty much where these things are. So I'm happy with that. Happy to give the customer back his bike and get another one of these beauties back on the dyno. See you later.